So this is our first reading of the spring. Our second reading of the spring that John McGoddins will be back for to introduce is Wayne Kestenbaum. A really totally splendid writer, and that will be in the middle of April. But before that, Dan Smith will be here in residence for a week between the 26th and the 29th of March, give or take a few minutes. Okay, so that's upcoming too. And then, almost at the very end, I should also say that this is not a Trias event, but the renowned Israeli novelist Hirshson is going to be here to give a reading and to talk. Just because he's going to be around in Rochester, and Michael Dubkowski in Religious Studies is connected with the foundation that's bringing him to just be in residence in Rochester. And one of the things he's going to do is just come here and give a reading. So you'll hear more about that. Okay, so that's what's upcoming. Tonight we have, I guess, what I've started calling the trans-genre event, which Lori Sheck will explain and talk about. It's great to have her here. I've known her with large gaps of time in between for a very long time, and it's one of the pleasures of getting older is to watch what happens to people who were just your age back when they were your age, and to see what transpires. So that's a pretty wonderful, complicated thing in general, right? Let me give an introduction to Lori's work. She lives in New York City, teaches at the New School in the graduate writing program. But I'm not going to say much more about that except to give this introduction and other results. You'll hear the names of some other poems and other books, but we don't really do that so much here, right, to do the resume stuff, and so I'm not. So here we go. The German writer, Walter Benjamin, said that he dreamed of writing an essay that would be composed entirely of quotation. That is, entirely of the words of others. Such an essay, he said, would be his most personal and his truest expression. The French writer Simone Weil, who, like Benjamin, died during the Second World War, said that, and I'm paraphrasing, the most individual parts of ourselves are not those parts that are unique to ourselves. The parts that are our truest selves are those parts that we have in common with others. Others, therefore, can voice us, and we are the composite, the particle board of our languages, our cultures, our civilizations, by way of inheritance, experience, education, and nature, which for Ralph Waldo Emerson meant the natural world, and which includes our animal selves as well. All of that voices us, and we in turn give voice to all that we're composed of. The brain is wider than the sky, for put them side by side, the one the other will contain with ease, and you beside, wrote Emily Dickinson, getting at something similar. To the extent that this is true, it will say something about writing and the forms it can take. It will say something about the kind of voluntary and involuntary ambassador a writer is. It will say something about the importance of steeping and immersing yourself. It will say something important about the idea and nature of originality. And it will say something about how things fit together, and how fit together is less accurate than to aggregate or clash or resonate or establish new terms of relation through proximity or juxtaposition. Silence and cacophony may be blood relatives. I think Lori Sheck has found her way to this kind of practice brilliantly in her book-length poem, Captivity, her fifth book of poems. She has extended this practice now in her beyond genre books, A Monster's Notes, and in the second of what she's envisioned as a trilogy, Island of the Mad, which she will talk about and after her own fashion read from tonight. So I will say a brief word about Captivity, which feels like the gateway to the mode of her current work by noticing in it her attention to the binding agent, that observer and creator of, as Henry James called it, the figure in the carpet. Captivity's first epigraph from Emily Dickinson is, "Captivity is consciousness, so's liberty," which signals that the book will be about thinking itself, which is another word for consciousness if thinking is understood rightly. Thinking in a capacious way, in a way that's inclusive of somatic life, for example, is at the core of summoning and ventriloquizing and orchestrating, in a word, voicing an array of the not me, as Emerson called it, which speaks us back to ourselves. In one poem she writes, "Thinking is a truceless act," kind of an Emerson, a Dickinsonian way to put it. And in this brief poem, I'll read the entirety of, from early in the book, we get a phenomenological feel for the three-dimensionality of thinking. Thinking has a quiet skin, but I feel the break and fled of things inside it. Blue hills most gentle in calm light, then stretches of assail and ransack. Such tangles of charred wreckage, shrapnel bits, singling and singeing where they fall. I feel the stumbling gait of what I am, the quiet uproar of undone. How to be hidden is a tempting, violent thing, each thought breaking always in another. All the unlawful elsewheres rushing in. So in this poem are some of the unlawful elsewheres, which is a phrase that opens the door to the subversive purpose of this kind of voicing. In a seemingly different mood, W.B. Yeats put it this way, "Now that my ladder's gone, I must lie down where all the ladders start, in the foul rag and bone shop of the heart." The difference for Laurie Sheck is that the heart, like the brain, is also wider than the sky. So join me in welcoming Laurie Sheck.
That was such a beautiful introduction. It's like an essay. Thank you. And it's such a pleasure to be here. And as David mentioned, we knew each other when we were like 20.
Yeah.
I had dark hair, you had dark hair. You were homeless, basically. Diane, you were a professor. And it really is very moving. Like, I've been thinking the same thing. And we were like 20, and then all these years later, and a life that you are living, devoted to books, to reading, to writing, and it's just really a joyous thing. And it's a great life, the writing life. It's not easy, but it's a real pleasure, and a real pleasure to see people that you've known through the decades keep on exploring and doing it. So I'll just give a little introduction, because I've been trying to think, how do you, okay, I write these books, but how do you present them in public? You can't all like sit there and read it. And so I've been playing around with, what if I did it by video? What if I took just excerpts from the books and did an audiovisual kind of thing? So that's what I'm doing tonight. Partly because the new books I'm doing, they're sort of mashups of things, and I do a lot of research, and I look at manuscripts and things like that. As I was doing that, I was thinking, I wish the readers could see this too. So some of the things I took photographs of when I was researching, I just tried to put it together with the words, and so I have an audio-visual thing. As David mentioned, and for many decades I was a poet, and I wrote little books like this. And then something happened to me, and I wrote like books like this, which I never thought I would do. So I have 2 of them now, and it started to feel like there would be a third, which I don't know why, but I just did. There's a quote from Samuel Beckett that I think about from time to time in terms of working in the form I do. And he said, to find a form that accommodates the shape of the mess, that is the task of the artist now. And I think we all kind of feel that, like, this is a big, unwieldy mess. How do you bring structure to it? And so I started writing these hybrid works. I didn't intend to. I just, I read Frankenstein. My husband was ill, and his illness reminded me of Frankenstein's monster, the way he walked. And so then my husband could barely talk for a while. He's fine now. But I read Frankenstein, and the monster became my friend. And then when I go to the movies, I think, well, I'm going to movies, but what would the monster like to see? Blade Runner, you know, whatever. So we would go together, and I started taking notes, and I had all these notes that the monster was taking on the artificial intelligence lab at MIT. They had a resident theologian, which I found pretty interesting, you know, really dealing with how do, like, robots and humans relate. This is important. Genetic engineering. We took a bunch of notes. And then I started reading more, and The Lives of the Shelleys came into the book. That became a monster's notes, and it turned out my monster was living in the East Village in New York City in the 21st century. They had all died, the Shelleys. He knew them all, but he was like living on. So that was that. And then in the one you're going to see tonight, I wanted another mashup. And what I was trying to do is find areas of fascination, things that I really wanted to learn about, and then take my poetic skills and all my decades of writing poems, that sense of structure and imagery, and apply it to these longer books. They call them novels, the publisher, but you know, they're not exactly. I don't know what they are, and I use the page in alternate ways. Some pages will have like, one line or something. Some will look like long pages of prose. Some have passages that are crossed out. Some are lists. I have a lot of different forms. But in the one you're going to see, I was thinking, well, what would I like to learn about? What could be an interesting mashup? Sounds easy, but after like months of crying on the couch and things like that, I thought, Venice. I would like to learn about Venice. I would like to learn about Dostoevsky, who had an amazing life as a person and a writer. And I took one of Dostoevsky's novels, The Idiot, which is a great book, and has as a main character an epileptic who's Michigan, who's in a way closest to Dostoevsky of all the characters in his novels. Dostoevsky was also an epileptic. And it's amazing passages in that book about what epilepsy feels like. Anyhow, I take things that seem very disparate, and I hope I managed to bring it together. I think I do. It's always like a really wild ride, but that's part of the pleasure of it. So the book, Autumn and Mad, is in 3 sections, but you're actually going to see it, as I did in the video, in 2. I have a main character called Ambrose, and he's very solitary. He's hunchback. He has an illness called osteogenesis imperfecta. I don't know if any of you know it. You'll see it in the video. It's an illness in which your bones break very, very easily. Even if you listen to music, sometimes the sound of the music will break the bones of the inner ear. All my characters have terrible illnesses. I don't know what this is about me, but there are others in this book. I don't know. Anyhow, so he's kind of solitary. He works scanning books. You know, because now you make books digital, so he's doing that, and he's working in an office with a woman who they never talk. And then she finds out she has an illness, which is a real illness, which I read about, which is called, she doesn't know it at the time what she has, but it's called fatal familial insomnia. And it actually is a genetic illness that's from a few families in Venice. And it's appeared over the centuries, and what it is it's like scary, because you get to around middle age, and it hits just some people in families, and then you start to have trouble sleeping, and then you have more trouble sleeping, and then you don't sleep, ever, and you die of sleeplessness. But for a writer, it's sort of interesting, because you can imagine the hallucinations that take place, all sorts of things like that. Well, this woman has this illness, and and she's not sleeping, and she sends Ambrose on this mission to Venice to find a lost notebook. As a writer, you need some momentum like that if you want to think in a book, right? It's sort of like an excuse. So you'll see the part where he goes to Venice, and he happens, then a voice starts to come to him, and this voice is from Bulgakov's book, The Master and Margarita, which is a great book. If any of you want to read a great novel. I was reading it, and there was like a character appeared just in one paragraph, and I thought, oh, I think I'll take her and make her a character in my book. And in my book, she knows a lot about the Venetian plague, so I got to learn about the Venetian plague, which was really interesting. So you're going to see that section. And then the second section is when Ambrose, first of all, he's really surprised that he goes to Venice. Like, why would I? She asked me, well, why would I go? And he said, why not? And so in the second part, he does find the notebook, which really shocks him. There is really an island called Island of the Mad, San Sirolo. It's about 4 minutes from Venice, and it's where they kept the mad and the epileptics. It's now a conference center. That's what happens to every place, it seems. So I went there. And he finds this notebook, and it's by a man who was epileptic, and it recounts his time with a woman on the island who had fatal familial insomnia, and the epileptic is reading from Dostoevsky's The Idiot to this woman. She's going blind, and they share this book together, and that's their relationship. But as they're sharing it, she starts to slip away. Oh, sorry. She starts to slip away. She knows Dostoevsky's life really well. At some points, as you'll see, she starts to believe she is him. She's Dostoevsky. She hallucinates and then sort of disintegrates towards the end. I think it'll be pretty self-explanatory. So it's like 36 minutes, and you'll hear me narrate, you'll see the images, and then afterwards I'd be happy to talk about anything. So I would like do the computer, I will hope it runs.
Turn the front lights on.
I love doing all this computer stuff, but I don't understand computers at all. So I'm like starting it. So should I start?
Yeah.
We should start it.
Ambrose, hunchbacked and orphaned since birth, is sent by a woman he barely knows on a mysterious mission to Venice to find a lost notebook. Once there, he encounters the ethereal Frida, a figure lifted from a brief passage in Mikhail Bulgakov's novel, The Master and Margarita, who comes to him in the form of a voice that obeys neither the usual laws of time or space. Over a century before, she was executed for the death of her newborn baby, who she smothered and buried in the forest. She had been impregnated against her will by her employer. As punishment, in the afterlife, until recently, each night the white handkerchief she used to smother her baby has been brought to her. This part begins with Ambrose speaking. If you could see me, what would you see? A hunchbacked man in a frayed, camel-colored coat, his large, balding head seeming to protrude from his chest. And if I tried to look into your eyes, but it is rare that I would try, you would see a face straining sidewise, as if seeking some small, indiscernible speck in the distance. Something, maybe, it could love. I have glimpsed from the corners of my eyes sudden fright in the eyes of those who watched me. I don't blame them for their fear. Maybe we're all made of a secret, tender chaos not visible at the surface of skin, and I remind them of that chaos. Inside my hump, a bird has grown completely silent. Its dark, lidless eyes don't understand why it's not free. I was 8 when the doctors first told me the name of my illness, as I lay in the orphanage's infirmary, waiting for my bones to heal. Osteogenesis imperfecta, they said, and those words opened over me, a lunamaw's papery blind wings, though there was a harshness in them also. Gradually the doctors gave me to understand that my bones would break over and over, that this wouldn't change. And without sufficient collagen, the whites of my eyes would turn blue, 2 small C's, but waveless, all turbulence hidden. Then gradually the hump began as well. So much averse I found and wondrous harsh. Which of my books had said this? Though I write these things, I speak of them to no one. Ambrose receives a letter from a woman he has worked beside but has never spoken to. Dear A, it is hard to know where to begin. Please forgive me, I sleep little now. In time I will sleep less. Then probably within a year, not at all. Mine is a strange malady which is said to have its origins in Venice. There is a doctor there whose specialty is epilepsy, though he studies this as well. I expect nothing of him. In my sleeplessness, many things have begun to happen. Doesn't matter how or why. I see pages being written, then burned. The canals of Venice and St. Petersburg, a man in a stone room feverishly scribbling. Do you know Mikhail Bulgakov, author of the novel The Master and Margarita? Lately his book has been coming into my mind, I don't know why. It is said he burned his unfinished manuscript, then wrote it all over again. This was under Stalin. From 1928 until his death in 1940, he hid it in a drawer, worked on it in secret. It said no final version of the book survives, so there are many mysteries and questions. But what is known is the compassion of the text, its many strivings, transformations. Sometimes my mind wanders, I believe there is a certain notebook in Venice, now lost, not by Bulgakov, but by someone else. I sense in it many feelings not far from my own, and a person struggling with his body as I struggle with mine. But I know nothing of its contents, only that there's suffering in it, and gentleness, and deep care for another. Turgenev worried that one of his ghost stories was too fantastical, but Dostoevsky countered that in fact it was not fantastical enough, that the ordinary is stranger than anything, if only we could see it. In my mind's eye, I see you walking in Venice, though I know it is hard for you to walk. I see you climbing up stone steps and finding in a drawer or somewhere the pages of that notebook. But how can I even say this to you? Una notte bianco, a night in white. This is what Venetians call a sleepless night. So much whiteness in me now, so much distance. You will understand now why I can no longer come to the office. Think of how fragile they are, the islands of the Venetian lagoon, so thin and unprotected. I believe you understand such fragility. I have sensed your kindness. If you go there, I will write to you, I promise. To his surprise, Ambrose has agreed to go to Venice. Shortly after his arrival, he breaks several bones and is confined to his rented room for several weeks. When able to walk again, he wanders into the fish market where he hears a woman's voice, but sees no one. The next day, he hears it again. He realizes it is Frida, the young murderess from Bulgakov's book. Although skeptical, he listens as day after day she speaks to him about the devastating Venetian plague of 1575 and her desire to do penance by caring for the dying on the plague island of Lazaretto Vecchio. She speaks from a liminal state in which time and space are unfixed and fluid. Xenopsilla chiopsis, Pulex irritans. These are the names of the fleas that carry plague. White clouds of insects rise like fragile cities from the bed sheets. Such softness kills. Did you know that fleas can jump for hours, even days, without resting? That although they feed on rodents and humans, they inevitably die of starvation. Black-infested rats invade the dwellings of the poor, multiplying quickly in vast numbers. Imagine dirty wells overspilling, families huddled in close quarters. Everyone too afraid to go out. The authorities issue a new edict. All suspect clothing must be burned. But the poor hide what they can. What else is there to use against the cold? Sometimes they bury their coats in the hard earth. I tell you this as I watch your closed eyes, your face turned to the blank wall. Think of the shut houses of the poor, black pustules suddenly appearing, the chaos that replaces thought. On my island, Lazaretto Nuovo, the plague doctor has arrived to do his weekly rounds. He wears a broad black hat and a black coat sealed with wax to fend off infection. The coat extends from his neckline to his shoes. On his hands, he wears white gloves, and he carries a white measuring stick to mark the distance between himself and any other person. He refuses to stand close to anyone. He knows that skin can change from pink to black in a few seconds. It is more dangerous than a mind and quicker, more willing to erupt and vanish. But I haven't told you about his mask. It resembles your century's gas masks, but with a beak-like protrusion. The beak long and curved, its cavity filled with rosemary and camphor for detoxifying the air. In your century, you know this would be useless, though of course you have your own delusions. The round eyepieces are red glass. It is believed that the plague can be caught from just seeing an infected person. And now the doctor is inside the barracks. He lifts the sheets with his white stick, poking and probing, looking for abscesses and pustules. What does he see through his red lenses? Each face and body, the whole island drenched in redness, everything flaring, festering, decomposing. After a few minutes, he pauses to write in his ledger, then silently indicates with his hand who can stay another week, who will be sent to Lazaretto Vecchio to die. And now the boat arrives to take him back. And just as quietly as he came to us, he leaves us. The plague doctor wears red lenses over his eyes, tries to cover and protect the deepest recesses of his eyes. But it's as if my eyes are covered with glass lenses also, only mine are tinted a deep black, or sometimes a blinding, glaring white, but never any other color, and I can never take them off. That night, Frida's face was beside me, her eyes covered with black lenses. In the dark, I could make out almost nothing, yet I was sure it was her. I heard her clear her throat, but instead of speaking, she picked up a rock, but where were we? And started digging. When the hole was 2 feet deep and just as wide, She reached in to retrieve the pile of contaminated clothes she'd hidden. Hundreds of miniature white handkerchiefs, stained and meticulously folded. For many hours she unfolded and refolded them. The sun was black and a few clouds. Then she raised her hands to her temples and started tugging to remove the black lenses. But nothing she could do could get them off. I wish I could show you what I've found. It's a curious document from the year 1576, the year of Hirshson's death, remember? At first it seems just an ordinary plague ledger. August 21st, 40-year-old man dies within a day. Towards evening, a carbuncle breaks out on the right side of his mouth, followed by a high fever. By morning, a bubo has formed on his right groin. His heart stops that afternoon. August 22nd, 23-year-old pregnant woman dies. On Monday morning, falls ill with fever. Wednesday night, the fetus has aborted. Black morbilli all over her body. This afternoon, ceases breathing. The entries proceed in this way for many months. Hundreds of cases of the nameless dead. And always at the bottom of the page, the signature of the attending physician, Gaspare de Comite. But the last page is different. Here the doctor records his own symptoms. Wednesday, fever. Thursday through Saturday, there seems to be a reprieve. Sunday, a milky urine, red morbilli. Wednesday, black morbilli covering entire body. Beneath this, he confirms and signs his own time and date of death. Magister Gaspare de Comite died at approximately 5 o'clock in the afternoon, October 23rd. Today, I am remembering that on the island where you live, there is the Hospital of the Incurable. Or should I say it was there in the plague year of 1575. I believe it has since been abandoned. But back then it was inhabited by the ill who weren't sent to the lazarettos. And it was there that one day a man with a horrible pestilential mange called out in anguish for one of the young fathers. These were the years, of course, when everyone was afraid to touch or draw close to another. The young father was terrified, but scratched the patient's back as was required, then violently convulsed with nausea. But even then he didn't draw his hand away. This man is suffering, he said to himself. He wrote this down later. I must not shun him. What would I be if I shunned him? Then suddenly, almost without thinking, he lifted his pus-covered finger from the man's oozing back and placed it in his mouth and sucked it. And what of my own mouth? What of yours? And this white handkerchief inside me? I wonder what you think of what he did. Are you awake now, watching your red walls, hoping that my voice will leave you? Maybe you don't even hear me at all. What does it mean to truly feel the living flesh of another, the presence of another? I ask myself this often. I still need to find a boat to take me to Lazaretto Vecchio. I am not sure why I have told you what I have. Before I grew lost within this blackness, before I put on my black lenses, I saw the blue sclerae of your eyes. I read about such eyes in the fractured, twisted bones of your illness, the word incurable applied to your condition. I've read about a surgery involving the insertion of a metal rod into the bone's internal cavity. This aspect of you is so visible, and yet you treat it like a secret, so I think it deeply hurts and shames you. But it's why I noticed you that first day at the fish market. Though your head hung heavily, I could still glimpse the bluish whites of your eyes, and the hump, irregular, lumpy, beneath your camel-colored coat, the awkwardness and worse, you have no choice but to carry. I had read about body casts, about something wrong with the DNA, children forced to lie in bed, the silence too loud, bones fracturing the middle ear, a quick snap just like that, each part of them breaking. Even music can cause harm, or a wrong turn of the wrist opening a bottle. I wondered what it's like to live in minutes spiked and broken, each one too unwieldy, too unpredictable for your body. And in that split second I first saw you at the fish market, in my mind you were a child lying in a body cast, white as the white handkerchief I carried. A strange, inexplicable hurt went through me, and suddenly my voice was back, and I was speaking. I had lived for so long in total silence and black dirt. But when suddenly I could speak again, I meant to speak of you, yet spoke only of myself, that I condemned myself. I was looking at you, thinking only of you, and yet I opened my mouth and said, who could condemn me more than I condemn myself? And even if I hadn't spoken of you, there would have been so many things more interesting and more important to speak of than myself. Why didn't I speak of them? I told myself then I would speak to you of Venice, of the suffering here, that I would bring you anything but my own narrowness. You were alone. I would bring my facts to you. I didn't know what else I could offer, what else to do. I thought to myself, it is 1575. 50,000 souls have died in Venice. The senators have fled, but Cardinal Borromeo walks among the poor with his head uncovered and says to anyone who will listen, do not desert the afflicted. And the notary Benedette says the price of terror is isolation. He says, carry the sick to the hospitals and huts, nourish the infected, touch their feared bodies. Although Frida longs to know if Ambrose can hear her, and although he has grown very attached to her, for reasons he doesn't understand, he is unwilling to give her any sign. Even so, she continues speaking. I understand that I am nothing, that my suffering is nothing. But if I could understand how kindness moves from one body to another, from one mind into another, if I could see color again, if I could know the meaning of to kneel, the meaning of kindness, the meaning of tenderness, to tend, the meaning of to give. I believe now that you never heard me. Part 2, San Servolo. Ambrose reads from a stolen notebook written by an epileptic man on the hospital island of San Servolo, also known as the Island of the Mad. Along with his own notes, the man has pasted in notes from another inhabitant of the island, a woman who suffers from the genetic illness fatal familial insomnia, found in a small handful of Venetian families. Her eyesight is rapidly failing, and she's asked him to read to her from Dostoevsky's great novel, The Idiot, a book and author she knows well. As her own life blurs inside her mind, Dostoevsky's life becomes increasingly vivid to her, as do the lives of the novel's main characters. The less I sleep, the more I need the books I can no longer read. I believe you can help me. How can I explain why I need this so badly? The soul of another is a dark place, Prince Mishkin thinks to himself in The Idiot as he walks in his own darkness. And what chaos is found there. Did you come to read to me last night? Why can't I remember if you came? And now when you're not here, Dostoevsky's life is coming back to me. I don't know why. He spent 4 years in a prison camp. Did you know this? I tried to think of what it did to him, what it took from his mind, from his body, what it gave. Your window dark across the courtyard, the blurred branches of 12 trees between us. Why do I remember what happened to him so exactly when so much else is blurring? When he was 28, on the night of April 22nd, 1849, he was arrested for sedition, accused of conspiring against the encirclement of the peasantry. But he confessed nothing, refused to be destroyed by an empty word. After that came solitary confinement in the Peter and Paul fortress, 7 months on an island in the Neva, his cell windows smeared with an oily paste to prevent daylight seeping through. Then, one morning, he was ordered to dress quickly and was taken to Semyonov Square, where he was informed he would be put to death, but was sent instead on a long journey to Siberia, to the prison camp in Omsk. He was allowed one letter. Dear brother, today we were taken to Semyonov Square, where we were read the death sentence, then allowed to kiss the cross, and given our white death shirts to put on. I was the 6th in line for execution, standing in the 2nd row, and had no more than a few minutes left to live. Then suddenly a retreat was sounded. It was announced that His Imperial Majesty was granting us our lives. Apparently this had been planned all along. Maybe in this darkness you can't find me. There is a place inside the brain known as the nucleus solitarius. Did you know this? I pace inside my room and wait for you and think about this lonely name. Forgive me. How long has it been since I last saw you? The 12 trees in the courtyard lightly swaying, the lagoon stock still yet wandering. Your window's dark, but maybe you can see my lighted window. Electric wires with silver contacts are applied to the sleepless patient's brain surface or scalp. Even in the later stages, there can be intermittent periods of lucidity. The first human EEG was recorded by Hans Berger in 1924. As her sleeplessness increases, often she writes as if from prison, her life blurring more and more with Dostoevsky's. The young convict Sushala has taken to washing my clothes, greasing my boots, trying to find me extra bread. I don't know why he does this. Each day he walks the prison yard alone with lowered eyes, scars all over his bare back. Scarcely any words have passed between us. Once I tried to thank him with some coins, but tears welled in his eyes, and he turned angrily and wouldn't take them. It was the first time I had ever seen a prisoner crying. His mind dark to me. I will never know his mind. But how did he get those scars on his back? Why does he want to take care of me? What could he be thinking? After I leave here, I will never hear his name again, or know what's become of him. Never know why he chose me, who he is. And there is another one who also seeks me out. His name is Petrov. He has been here for as long as I, but always acts in a great hurry, as if he must rush back to his real home in town, because of course he couldn't actually live here. He comes up to me and asks me questions. Is Napoleon an emperor or a president? Is it true, as they say, that there are monkeys as large as a tall man with arms that hang down to their heels? What are the antipodes? Do people in Sumatra walk on their heads and not their legs? Was Danton a real person or invented? What happened to Rome after it burned? I try my best to answer. Then he bows his head and rushes off in silence. And in spite of the most recent progress in sleep research, it is still not understood why the hippocampal circuity begins to fail and can no longer control the flow of information. Her delirium increases. But why do we assume a mind is just one single mind? All these words I send to you, unsigned, disordered. And what if the universe is just a jumbled heap of moments, and all existence dependent on the existence of coincidences? 9 years have passed, and I've finished out my sentence. The doctors in Petersburg confirmed my illness is epilepsy, and that I will never get well. They can't keep my brain from catching fire, or help protect the scattered words inside me. And the universe spinning and spinning. Black holes, dark matter. Dear Mikhail, dear Apollon, dear Sonechka, I don't want to fall, but I will fall. I've left Petersburg for Europe to consult specialists in Switzerland and France as my seizures are increasing. Today in Basel, I'm in a museum looking at Holbein's dead Christ, and I feel I'm falling, but for once I keep looking and don't fall. The eyes are dull, half open, the face a nauseous blue-green, the skin on the verge of decomposing, the mouth rigid, unclosed. There is not one hint of consolation. Who would want to sit beside this corpse? You can almost smell it rotting. Nothing else on the canvas but these two horizontal forms, stone slab, brutalized, hurt body. The slab so much easier to look at than the other. Dear Sonechka, I am at work on a new book. I want it to be as uncompromising as Holbein's dead Christ. I think it is impossible to know what goodness is until it is reduced to complete powerlessness. There is a prince I have to hurt in order to reveal his goodness, in order to begin to know him. I don't know if I can do this. I am tired of beautiful words. I never liked them. Although he still reads to her, the sleepless woman is convinced the epileptic man no longer comes. They have reached the book's concluding pages, where Prince Mishkin holds and comforts the murderer, Rogozhin, in the same room where the murdered Nastasia lies on a bed behind a green curtain. When the police finally arrive, Mishkin's eyes are glassy. The night has filled him with horror. He's unable to speak. Soon after, he is sent to a sanitarium in Switzerland. Every now and then, an attendant brings him outdoors, where he sits mutely in a wooden chair on a green hill. When they came looking for me and I didn't answer any of their questions, they took me away. And then I didn't know how to go on in the world anymore. I don't know if I can live in my own body. But why is the white dress still on the floor and the white flowers? And now where am I? And my body is whose body? I am watching Mishkin touch the murderer's face with such kindness, his tears spilling from his eyes, wetting the murderer's cheeks. But how can his touch contain such kindness, given all that's happened? Why doesn't he get up and leave him? Why does he still reach to soothe the pale, crazed man beside him? How can he stand to hold him through so many hours? Am I in Petersburg or on an island off of Venice? Am I across from your lit window, or is your window dark now and you're elsewhere? Why is my hand stroking a murderer's face? How can this possibly be happening? How can I feel this strange love for him? Why don't I pull back in horror? Even my arms are white mist now, and my legs. Maybe I was never on an island. Maybe you never came to me at all. But do you remember what Prince Mishkin said, that kindness can rescue everything? I still wonder what you think of what we read. Sleep spindles, prions. Do you believe that kindness is so powerful, there's a way that it remains no matter what? No earth, no sun, no moon. I wish I still had hands to write to you, to find you. And the stars will go out and there will be no life-bearing planets. But what's here is higher than love, and there is such joy. It still amazes me to walk without fetters. And your voice so tenderly, and your breath, your moving hands. Even my face is white mist now, and my hair. The green hill has vanished, the green fields. But how can the earth survive like this when it's so white, so insubstantial? Where are the 12 trees, the night filling with our turning pages? White mist of vanished footsteps, vanished eyes. On realism, from a letter. Oh, my friend, I have my own special view of reality in art, and what the majority call almost fantastic and exceptional sometimes constitutes the very essence of the real. In every newspaper, you come across reports of the most real facts and the most odd, but they are reality because they are facts. They occur every moment and they are not exceptional. Fyodor Dostoevsky, February 26, 1869.
Well, I ended with the Dostoevsky quote because that's, he wrote, you see his life was so strange, and he got accused of that in his books, what he wrote couldn't possibly, they were too fantastical, and he really just said, just read the newspaper. you know? The real is, you don't get weirder than that. After seeing this, any comments, any questions you want to make? I'm happy to answer it. Yeah.
So that was a really dreamlike atmosphere. Images dissolve into one another. The camera slowly zooms across Ken Burns, and images are always layered on top of each other, and you slip from place to place, word to word. Can you tell me about the editing process and some thoughts going into image choices? Because there's like historical art, straight up photos, probably Hubble Space Telescope stuff in there too.
Yeah.
And especially some of, like, there's some really potent layering with eyes and portraits on top of one another.
Yeah.
I want to hear all about that.
Well, I can only tell you part, because I didn't do the whole thing myself. I wrote the book, then I collected images, and I worked with a video artist. And, you know, we did some in person, we did some by Skype, and we would just sort of talk about what the passage felt like, and then she was very good at moving, like, in and out, like going horizontally, or, you know, giving a sense of movement to the thing. But it was really a collaboration, so I would come up with a lot of the images, and we would, you know, talk about how they would work, but she knew how to do it. And the images are fascinating. Some of them, like when I was doing the monster notes, I could take my camera into the Frankenstein, the four-timer collection, Shelley in a Circle. I was working, and they let me photograph. Let's say I was reading a letter by Mary Shelley or Percy Shelley or something like that, and they let me photograph them. So I had those, but with this, I had Dostoevsky's working notebooks for when he was writing The Idiot, which was really fascinating. And he had a very hard time with that book, and he would move the characters around. He just got all confused. Rogozhin was the bad guy, but then he was the good guy. Mishkin was the good guy, then he was the bad guy. It was all mixed up. And he also had mixed in with that his. He would write down whenever he had an epileptic fit, and it often was at certain phases of the moon. And he would have the fits also at very intense times of his life, and he felt very ashamed. The night he got married, he had a fit. The night his little daughter was born, he had a fit. And he felt sort of like unworthy to be a father because the baby was being born, and look what happened to him. And then when he was writing The Idiot, this was his first child. His little daughter died when she was 3 months old, and he and his wife were devastated. And that death really colored what the novel felt like when he took it up again. Became an act of mourning in many ways. But I came across all these interesting images, and the question was how to bring them together. Yeah.
So my question is kind of about the perspectives that you take on, because I think it's very hard to write from a perspective that is not similar to our own. Especially, you said you write a lot of different disabled bodies.
Yeah.
What is your process like to kind of ensure that you are getting a nuanced portrait of these kinds of people's experience?
Well, I think you let the facts teach you, for one thing. You know, I study a lot of facts, and so you get that. And I think that to make room for the facts to speak is very important. Not to so much editorialize, but to say this happens. And late in the book, there's a passage. There was a scientific article I was reading. I was studying children with osteogenesis imperfecta. And oddly enough, there's some thought that the genetic cause of the illness also has a genetic component that makes the people who suffer from it have very optimistic temperaments, which is strange, kind of fascinating. But this little boy, I read the transcription of his, what it was this was an article that took children who had survived with this disease. And so we're looking back on what it was like to be children. And their parents, of course, the parents had to be counseled to let the children, try and have a life, because the parents were very tempted to just hold that child so safe so that the child wouldn't break. And the doctors were saying, in these studies, the doctors were saying, you have to let this child break. The child's going to break if they're going to have any life at all. It's just part of it. And so one guy was looking back on a year. He was in a body cast, a full body cast for a year. And the sense of sound that developed, the sense of hearing, I thought was really incredible. It was a beautiful passage that he wrote, which I then took. And he was saying that he could tell, he would lie in bed, and his parents would be in another part of the house. If they picked up a fork in the kitchen, he could tell it was a fork. If he picked up a spoon, he could tell it was a spoon. His hearing was that acute. He could not move. He knew what shoes they were wearing. Every rhythm in that house he knew, and that's what he was connected to. So I think, you learn from the facts, and you let them speak through you. You don't boss them around, and then you let yourself be a feeling person. And you take, you draw on your own experiences of whatever affliction or whatever you might have, but that doesn't dominate it. I feel like if I respect the facts, they'll guide me. You know? Yeah.
Can I follow up on Matt's first question? One of the things I found interesting visually was that the visual accompaniment to your voice and was having to continually establish a relationship to illustration. Is it just illustrating the words, literally sometimes showing them? That can kind of get deadly. It can kind of feel just like pointing at things.
Yeah.
And so it does a little bit of that, but then, and maybe that's connected to the movement, to some of the variety, but it keeps moving away and adding something in that is not literally being said, so that it breathes a little more.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering, when you and Francesca were working on it, how much the two of you, she thought about how to make it stay alive.
Oh, we had to, because the writing itself is associative. So how do you, it was really hard to get that feel in. You can't just be literal, and you have to keep it moving. Like in a piece of writing, you have to keep, how do you, when you're writing, you start out with a blank page or a computer, and the question is, how do you activate that space? That's always the question in any art form. It starts out a blank and you activate it. It becomes like a nervous system. How do you do that? And I didn't know a lot about the visual, but with her, I had a sense of, or we tried at least to get things, keep them moving. Just like, as I say, in the writing, just as in the books, part of what keeps them moving, I felt that what the page looks like is important. I don't know if you can see, but I had pages in both these books where I almost wanted to hurt the page. I wanted to hurt the language, and I would put big X's or something like that. And then, so you make the video, and you think, what's the equivalent of that? Not a linear kind of movement, but sort of an oddness of feeling in a way.
That same line of thinking, did you do this as a voiceover, or did you record your audio first and work the video into it, or a combination? Or?
I had to do the audio separate, but we matched it up. We knew what the images were going to be.
So you didn't have the images in front of you when you did the audio?
No, but I'm trying to think, did we? No, I had the audio, and then we kept on hunting for images. It's amazing what you can find on the internet too. Although a lot of what you find, they put some writing on it so you can't copy it, that kind of thing. But I found looking for the images really fun, really, really fun. And when you're dealing with words all the time, there's something about the visual, just the pure pleasure of finding the images. It was, I couldn't stop myself. I was like addicted to it, and I had to stop. Even the white handkerchief. I mean, we went through so many handkerchiefs. I couldn't find the right one, and then finally, you know, when you go on these sites for like businesses that are selling handkerchiefs, or businesses that are selling like lenses and things like that. So I learned a lot about all those things that you buy. But you find things, you know. Anything else?
I have a question about, because am I remembering correctly that doesn't the white handkerchief have glue around the outside in the book?
It does.
And so one thing I was wondering, in looking at this, you have to, there are so many strands kind of being braided throughout the book. How do you choose which strands to use when you're trying to present a shorter version of it? And then do you have to purposely not disclose certain things in order to keep the kind of purity of it?
It was really hard. I did so many scripts. Like, I would do a script and then I think, I don't think this is clear. And then I'd try another and a different combination. I was getting really pretty desperate. And then I think it's like what you indicate, you have to decide to leave a lot out, a whole lot out, to try and get enough of a line. I don't even know how well I succeeded, but it's just, you have to be sort of ruthless about it. And it's hard to envision. You know the book well, and yet you have to think what's it like for somebody who doesn't know it at all. You leave a ton out. Well, thank you.
You are.